the briefing on the SASSA grants payment. Those 4 items we have agreed that they will be processed in a special cabinet meeting. And when that special cabinet meeting has been convened, we will make sure that the responsible reports are there. I cannot talk about the findings of the NPC. I don't speak for myself. I speak for the cabinet. Cabinet did not consider the report. It will be considered under during the special cabinet meeting, and it's only then that we can express a view as cabinet on that. And the NPC, led by Minister Ramkhopa, will then will also explain or that they can even, as long as the report is considered before cabinet, they can even brief before there's a post-cabinet briefing. And that's what we expect. So the only issue that arose is that the report had not served in cabinet, and I cannot account for the Planning Commission and the Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation why they had not factored in before they convene a media briefing, why they've not factored in a briefing to cabinet, because cabinet meets every second week. And for that matter, because we understood the agency from the president and the cabinet secretariat, we appreciate the importance of that. They were permitted to submit the report directly to cabinet without serving in the cabinet committees, because the matters that are processed by cabinet, they first serve in cabinet committees. Unfortunately, the cabinet of yesterday could not finish its business. The remainder of the business will be finalized at the special cabinet meeting. On the question around the back and forth on the mayor of the city of Johannesburg, and I think the situation that we have is that we have a water shortage issue in Gauteng and across the country. But in Gauteng, the major water shortage is in the areas of responsibility of the cities. That is the responsibility, the city of Tshwane, city of Johannesburg, and Ekurhuleni in the main. And the minister has been in the Department of Water and Sanitation and Rainwater. They have been intervening to say, how do we manage the water shortages? But it requires the availabilities of the mayors as water authorities to come to the party to assist and collaborate. In terms of the briefing that we received yesterday, the water losses that are experienced through at the side of Rainwater, which is the responsibility, which is the water board, which is the responsibility of the Department of Water and Sanitation, it's at 3%, which is below the internationally accepted standards. But the water losses that are experienced on the side of the cities, whether it's Tshwane, it's Ekurhuleni, or city of Johannesburg, it's higher. And that water losses are because of not repair or non-repair of damaged infrastructure or leaking pipes, pipes that are left non-attended, and all sorts of areas that are responsibilities of the cities as Water Service Authority. So that's what the minister, that's why we had indicated that he will brief with the mayors. We must indicate, even in the absence of the mayor of Johannesburg, the Johannesburg Water has been part of the meetings with the Minister of Water and Sanitation. And it's not what the minister require assistance with from the cities. It's what the cities require assistance with from the Department of Water and Sanitation. And that's why it's important that the executive mayors form part of those meetings. We'll then take the online questions.
Thank you very much, Minister, and also mindful of the time that you have also indicated. We'll then go straight to the online questions. I suspect, Minister, some of the questions you might have already responded to, but I'll request the team to go through them. Takalani, take us through the online questions. Minister, I think there are 6.
Thank you, Mr. Dear. We'll try to be as quick as possible in the interest of time. The first question is coming from Marvin Adams, who is a freelance journalist, and the question is, in light of the recent findings from the new Global Organized Crime Index, which reveals the increasing influence of the mafia in South Africa and highlights a concerning erosion of public trust in SABC, could the minister please provide insight into whether the cabinet has engaged in discussions regarding the alarming emergence of organized crime in the country? And additionally, what measures and strategies is the government considering to address and mitigate the growing threat of organized crime and to restore public confidence in the law enforcement agencies such as South African Police Service. And we have Christian Duplessis from Network 24. The DA in Johannesburg on Sunday criticized the ANC government for the renaming of William Nicol Drive to Winnie Mandela Drive, saying it is an attempt to erase the history of Afrikaans people, and the Afrikaner Bond said it is an attempt to erase the history of minorities, and was the renaming of the road indeed an attempt to erase the history of Afrikaans people or minorities, and if not, what is the purpose of renaming? And we have Kolekani Maguan from Business Times, and the question is, in terms of imports to address the bird flu outbreak, how confident is Cabinet of the feasibility of importing eggs in particular, and which countries will those eggs come from, and how real is the risk of South Africa facing a chicken or eggs shortage in December? And Paul from Bloomberg, as the Minister of Finance briefed Cabinet members on possible budget cuts for the 2024 financial year. Hajra Omadi from Business Day, it seems as though some are vandalizing water infrastructure in metros to encourage water tanker contracts. What is being done by the state security agencies to stop these people turning into fully fledged syndicates? And the rest of the questions, Mr. B, are around the NDP 10-year review, which already addressed by Mongo's question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. That was the last round of questions that we have, and we might invite you to respond to them so that we can also release you.
Thank you. On the questions around the new Global Organized Crime Index, I do not think we can talk. Mafia, there's a particular definition of mafia. We in South Africa, we talk about high organized crime, and we have acknowledged the resurgence of organized crime from the Justice, Crime Prevention and Security Cluster, and we have indicated that we've got an integrated plan to fight against crime, and we have, in the recent past, immediately have dealt with, if you recall, the Mercado 19 as part of that syndicate of organized crimes that we've been dealing with. But the security cluster will be briefing around October, if not November, around the specific fight on the intelligence-driven organized crime prevention plan and the work that we are doing as a government to deal with that phenomenon, whether it's organized crime in tobacco or in cash in transit heights, in the business forums, and in the illegal mining and other related areas. And I would not want to talk about the innuendos about the trust deficit. We have different statistics to that matter. And in terms of the question around the finance minister briefing possible budget cuts for the year 2024 financial year, you'll recall that cabinet budget is not budget of the Minister of Finance, is the budget of cabinet. It is approved by cabinet before it's tabled, and including the fiscal discipline measures that we are working with, which in the last briefing we indicated that various ministers and directors general will be meeting with the president and the deputy president to, in line with the priorities of the ministers as agreed with the president, on how to deal with the prioritization, such that prioritization are not affected by the fiscal discipline measures that must be put in place to manage the current shortfall that we have. In terms of the question around the water tankers, contractors vandalizing the water infrastructure to perpetuate water shortages so that they benefit, how are we going to prevent that? We have learned in other instances in other provinces where there have been a high resurgence of use of water tankers to provide water, that when government is supposed to then now extend reticulated water, there's continuous damage of water infrastructure, of vandalism of the infrastructure. So the Department of Water and Sanitation is implementing such measures, and that's why the collaboration with the various cities or executive mayors of the various cities and mayors of the respective municipalities is important, that we prevent the abuse by those who are in the water tanking business to vandalize infrastructure. We acknowledge that the water tanking business is critical and important in assisting to bridge the gap where there's no water flowing from taps or where there's a shortage of water, and ensuring continuous supply of water. And we know that there are majority of them who are in responsible business, but of course there are also chance takers. And we continue to, as part of our work to protect the government infrastructure, not only water, but the infrastructure in its entirety, that the security cluster continues to work with relevant authorities to make sure that we resolve the water crisis and protect the government, the infrastructure in its entirety. On the question around the renaming of William Nicol as the attempt to erase history of African people, I think South Africa belongs to all who live in it, black and white, and of all language groups that are recognized in the constitution of this country. And the history of South Africa cannot be a history that excludes others. A history of South Africa, it must be a history that includes others. We, as a country, we need to recall that to build a nation, we need to make sure that we are all reflected in that nation. That's why the definition of a rainbow nation never fitted the blacks, because there's no black color in the rainbow. And for the DA and the AfriForum to want to continue the exclusion of the African history and black history in this country, to protect the history of Africans, that minorities that also had a very negative impact on blacks in general, it doesn't contribute to nation building. And we do not want to create a situation where there's an uprising by a group who feel excluded in a country where they belong with, more so when they're in majority, because we continue to protect the history of the minority. It's only in this country that after our freedom in 1994, we have maintained a Voortrekkerhoogte, we have maintained symbols of apartheid oppressors, because we said we cannot erase a history we need to recall, but there must be a history of an inclusive South Africa. So the renaming of William Nicol is in line to Winnie Mandela Avenue, is in line with building a united South Africa, and also acknowledging the past that was oppressive, and acknowledging the role of those who fought for the freedom of the majority of South Africans. On the avian bird flu and the chances of the chances of imports, there is an acknowledgement that if we are not successful in managing the avian bird flu, there might be threats on food security, in particular the availability of the poultry products, eggs and meat. And the Department of Agriculture and the Minister of Agriculture and the Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition will have to work on the mechanisms which they are currently considering of what should be a preventative mechanism so that there is no shortage of poultry products in this country. in case such a need arises. But the Minister of Agriculture and the Department of Agriculture, they are confident on the measures they've put in place, working with industry to make sure that we can we can limit the impact of the avian bird flu in the industry in its totality, and that's why they are working with SAPRA on the vaccine. And we must also indicate that in the statement we indicated the provinces that are affected by avian bird flu. So the Department of Agriculture will continue to work with other provinces in particular, because we prioritize local production, to ensure that the provinces that are not affected, they remain insulated from the spread, but also they can ramp up production so that we minimize imports to the best of our ability and increase production locally so that we can feed our nation. Thank you.
Minister, thank you very much for the briefing. Colleagues, this brings us to the end of the post-cabinet briefing. May I also indicate that the recording of the post-cabinet briefing is available on the government and GCIS platforms, and you might also visit that to revisit it. The statement also is normally shared of the post-cabinet briefing, and this briefing is adjourned. And thank you very much, Minister.